the central government on 23rd of July 2020 notified the Consumer Protection E-commerce Rules 2020. Now the proposed amendments is in public domain. In pursuit to the recommendations by the parliamentary panel headed by the member of the parliament Pratap Singh Bajwa, and the Department of Consumer Affairs is seeking views, comments, and suggestions on this proposed amendments to the Consumer Protection E-commerce rules. So the purpose of this roundtable is mainly to seek the views of consumer organizations in India, and to understand the understanding about this proposed amendments. And as all of you know, this draft proposes a host of changes: mandatory registration requirements of online retailers, greater scrutiny of flash sales, including ban on fraud and flash sales, disclosure of regarding cross-selling of goods, prohibition of mis-selling of goods, non-discrimination of imported and domestic goods, enhanced liability of e-commerce entities, a stronger grievance redressal mechanism. Like that, several changes are proposed in this particular amendment. I'm not taking more of the time. We have 7 speakers today in this roundtable who will be speaking. We have Mr. Pradeep Mehta, who will be delivering the opening address. I think to this group, he does not require any detailed introduction. He is the founding Secretary General of CUTS International and also the chairman of the CUTS Institute for Regulation and Competition. He is a member of several policy-making bodies of Government of India and state governments and intergovernmental organizations. And presently, he is also a member of the Chief Minister of Rajasthan Economic Transformation Advisory Committee, along with various other membership. And recently, he was conferred the Scotch Challenger Award for the contribution to public policy on competition policy. He will be delivering the opening address. 2 of the speakers will be making the presentation on this proposed amendments. One is Gauri Gokhale. Gauri is partner at the Nitin Desai Associates, and she is also a senior leader who leads the IP, technology, media, and entertainment law practices at the Nitin Desai Associates with about 22 years of experience. She has been advising international and domestic clients in the TMT space on complex structuring, regulatory, IP, commercial law, and litigation matters. Gauri will be making one of the presentations. And also we have Vivan Sharma, who is partner at the Coin Advisory Group. Vivan is an economist with considerable experience in the Indian policy circuit. He steers the advocacy initiatives at Coin. Previously, he has served as the CEO of the Global Governance Program at the Observer Research Foundation, or ORF. So both Gauri and Vivan will be making presentations on this proposed amendments. We have 4 speakers representing various consumer organizations who will be sharing their thoughts on this proposed amendments. We have Advocate Saroja Sundaram, who is the Executive Director of Citizen, Consumer, and Civic Action Group based in Chennai, and she is also the Director of Consumer Protection. Saroja leads CAG's work related to consumer protection, where she manages research projects on various consumer issues. And she is also a member of the Council of the Consumers International, headquartered in London. She is representing India and the South Asia region in the CI's council. We have Anusha Iyer. She is an advocacy officer and associate editor of Grahak Sati, which is the weekly newsletter at the Consumer Education and Research Center based in Ahmedabad. Anusha is a postgraduate in MBA with a specialization in marketing. After brief stint with the banking sector and later with the consultancy firm, she joined the CERC about 10 years back. We have Advocate Surendra Kanishria, a good friend of CUDS. He is the former chairman of Consumer Guidance Society of India, based in Mumbai. Presently, he is a practicing company secretary at Surendra Kanishria Associates. Having authored 6 books, he is a regular contributor to the media on company law and competition law. In various capacities, he had served CGSI, and presently he is also a member of the steering committee of International Network of Civil Society Organizations on Competition. We also have my colleague Ujjwal Kumar, who will be sharing CUDS views on these proposed amendments. Ujjwal is the policy analyst at CUDS and the deputy head of the CUDS CCER. That's the CUDS Center for Investment, Competition, Investment and Economic Reforms. The whole session, Mr. Mehta will be chairing and moderating. So now I invite Mr. Pradeep Mehta for the opening address, and I hand over the roundtable to him to chair and take the discussions forward. Over to you, Mr. Mehta.
Thank you, George. Thank you very much. And let me add to George's warm welcome to all the panelists and the audience who are here, the distinguished audience, I would say. Having said that, what I would just like to mention to it's a tough job to moderate an event with 6 speakers, and we've already lost a little bit of time in the opening remarks. I am also going to take a little bit of time. But let me try and set the tone of the event in a manner that the discussions are constructive and fruitful. We all know that the pandemic has shown the benefit of I don't know why I'm not getting speaker view here. Anyway, I hope I'm visible and audible.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Good. It has been beneficial to consumers in various ways. Hence, we feel that the emerging e-commerce system should be promoted without hindrance or without over-regulation. What we have seen in the past is that often over-regulation leads to the sector struggling, and innovation suffers the most when you have over-regulation. If you look at a quotidian example in India, the BPO sector, the business process outpost processing sector, including the IT-enabled services sector in India, prospered, flourished because of 2 reasons. One is we had an excellent telecom system in our country, and B, there was no government regulation. There was no government department also to deal with this matter, and therefore they were able to grow exponentially, and today India is a leader in the ITES world. I'm just giving you an example on the side. Now, what we do see in the e-commerce sector, that many small and medium enterprises are also finding it very beneficial for them, whether they are supplying or whatever they're doing. Now, but in order to understand the proposal, we must understand the political economy in our country. You know, most of these decisions are driven by political economy considerations, on which quite often consumers have a very little handle. Now, in my opinion, it is more to satisfy the agitating trading community and maybe some large domestic players rather than to advance consumer welfare. We were expecting that the government will come out with a new draft e-commerce policy, which has been pending for a long time. And by the way, I did serve on the government think tank on e-commerce policy, and what they came out was a Christmas tree of recommendations trying to cover anything and everything. So it was quite a waste of time. And currently, the redraft e-commerce policy is still within wraps of the government. We've not been able to get a copy of the same or be consulted. Now, we were certainly not expecting the government to try and address trade concerns via the consumer protection rules. My take is that if such amendments will be made, it will dilute the spirit of the consumer protection regime for which we successfully fought in the 1980s. And mind you that the struggle was very hard to bring in the Consumer Protection Act in 1986, but this is not the occasion for me to go into details. But to just say that at that point of time, when we had a command and control economy, anything to do with consumers was an uphill task. We wanted that regime should be procedurally simple with the least legal complications, so that a general Indian consumer can also have easy access to getting the dispute settled. You know what our court system is, and the less said, the better. It's just getting worse and worse. Now, what is particularly problematic about this bill is that it is adding platform to business regulatory elements into this regime. It is not a consumer protection issue. The members of consumer organizations may also not have the capacity to deal with disputes arising out of certain proposed provisions, such as abuse of dominance or those related with data privacy. For abuse of dominance, we already have the Competition Act. And for data privacy, there is a new data privacy law which is likely to come up in the monsoon session of the parliament. It has its own problems, but I'll again not go into that. Another very important point that I noticed in this particular amendment is that it contains a lot of provisions which should have gone into the main law and not into the rules. And that then violates the constitutionality of these rules. You cannot have law interpreted through rules which are not provided in the law. Now, usually the rules are drafted in a way they are, of course, checked by the subordinate legislation committee in the parliament, but the checks and balances are there to see that they are not misused in this particular manner. Now, the other thing is, of course, this proposed amendment will increase regulatory overlap and increase tough battles, as we have seen already happening in the country. There are many such tough battles which are happening, which impact consumer interest directly, but they are policy issues which still have to be dealt with under different jurisdictions. To give you an example, there is an aviation fuel cartel which was challenged before the Competition Commission of India. The Delhi High Court stated saying that the Petroleum and Natural Gas Regulatory Board has a jurisdiction, which is utter nonsense. But that matter is still pending. And maybe people have lost interest in it totally. And there are many other such tough issues that we find coming up, dealing with the policy work in the area of competition regulation. We come across several anomalies like this, which only delay economic reforms. Now, with such kind of regulatory checks and balances which are anti-progress, you'll only reduce our competitiveness. If you look at the Institute of Management Development's Global Competitiveness Index, for the last 3 years, we remained at 43 among 64 countries. And that is pretty bad. On the other hand, on the ease of doing business, we continuously improve. And now, finally, what we have also said, and we've also asked for, is that it has to go through a regulatory impact analysis, any rule. Regulatory impact analysis requires 3 different tests: the necessity test, the legality test, and the proportionality test. What we've argued that it fails on all these 3 tests. Legality, I've already spoken about. necessity is whether do we need it at all or not. Now, consumer redressal, just to give an example, consumer redressal already exists in the Consumer Protection Act. What more do you want to add in terms of, saying, we have seen that a lot of dispute fora have been taken out of the jurisdiction of Consumer Protection Act and put into several sectors. That has not helped. There are separate electricity dispute fora, separate, and so on. Has it helped? No, it's not helped. Now, indeed, the consumer fora are overloaded, but it doesn't mean that we should start creating alternate fora unless they're absolutely necessary. Now, in terms of proportionality, whether any cost-benefit analysis has been done by the government at all or not to bring in these kind of rules, and that is, of course, important. Now, there are pending investigations with the Enforcement Directorate and the Competition Commission of India. We should wait for their outcome before the much-needed intervention, if at all it is required. Finally, I do say that in terms of consumer disputes, what would be necessary and important is, and this is what I would appeal to all, is that let the industry and consumer organization, along with the government, a tripartite consumer charter should be developed, which then allows the ascendancy of consumers in the marketplace. That let me now thank you once again for all of you for having heard me, and invite Gauri Gokhale, partner Nishit Desai, to make her presentation.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. And you made sort of introduced me with whatever I have done. But I think one important thing is back in 1998, I did my master's in consumer protection law from Mumbai University. And that time the law was absolutely nascent, just 12 years old, the 1986 Act, and we were still operating under MRTP. And things have tremendously moved since then. And just as an anecdote, I was, I test some of the concepts with my son, who is an aspirant lawyer. And I just asked him, he's still in 12th standard. I asked him that when you're taking, consumers online, right, in a digital space, what is it that comes to your mind that should be done to protect the consumers? And interestingly, he laid out all the points which were more disclosure driven, which were transparency driven, which were driven by a consumer redressal in a particular way, right? So I think all the nuances of the earlier version of the rules, in his mind was the first thing that came to his mind, right? But nobody will think about the supply side of the rules, etc., right? So I thought I'll just share that anecdote that, even when, even children think in that direction. And the reason I'm talking children, because you are creating the laws for the future, right? You're creating the laws for the next generation, and how they look at it also. And I'm sure, there are civil societies here. And the point that you made, Mr. Mehta, that is there an empirical study? Is there a study being done about the possible benefits, if any, of these particular rules? With that, if you allow me, I think I can share my screen, right? Where I can do a quick run through of the, the issues, the way I tried to, and how much time do I have for this?
7 to 8 minutes.
Yeah, okay, fine. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm not able to do a view version for some reason. So I think the point those have been made, if we see the Parent Act, which is a section 94, which is the genesis. Somehow my screen is stuck.
It's not coming.
Yeah. Is it?
Anyway,
okay?
carry on. Yeah, this come.
Yeah. So basically, if we see the genesis of these rules, which is section 94, what is the purpose? The purpose is to prevent unfair trade practice, which has already been defined in the main act. And the second one is to protect consumer interest and the rights. And the consumer rights for the first time have been articulated in the 2019 Act. So if this is the only genesis of these rules, can the rules go beyond this purpose to be achieved? Can the purpose be suddenly to, control competition in the country, etc.? right? Which is not in the, falling within this purview. So what are the main issues that I have with these regulations? And then I'll jump into the actual regulations. That there is an unreasonable distinction being made between an online and offline medium. So when we look at from a constitutionality perspective, that whatever you're looking at controlling a different medium, what is the difference between a brick and mortar medium and that medium? And whatever is warranted because of that medium, yes, of course, the law can be different. But if something which is not warranted by that medium, the law cannot be different. To give a simple illustration on a related party transaction, suppose you have a mall which is owned by a particular reality company, and they say that out of this 50% of the space is being given to my related parties, and those are the sellers in my mall. That's it. I will not allow others in this particular area. I will give only 50% for the others, if at all. Otherwise, it's all my sellers. Can you say that that is not allowed? Can you visualize to control that activity? No, right? So I think, and how is the consumer interest being addressed with that, right? The next issue is the vagueness, because several of these provisions, whether you see the definition of flash sale, whether you see the definition of fallback liability, all of these are very vague. The moment it is vague, it gives discriminatory treatment, because one is a regulator sitting today will interpret in a particular way. Tomorrow the individual changes, they will interpret in another way, right? So that itself leads to arbitrariness, violation of Article 14. And of course, freedom of trade is being controlled in an unreasonable manner, which is not warranted by 19.2. And therefore, even on that count, the rules would be unconstitutional. I think, sir, you already spoke about the rules being ultra virus, so I'll skip that point. I will now come to the point of overlap of regulations, where you have under the FDI policy, there is an expectation that there will be a separation between the marketplaces and the controls that they have on the sellers on the one hand, and on the other hand, in these rules, you want the marketplaces to take the fallback liability, right? So in its inherently, it is contradictory. Of course, the competition law and overlap has already been spoken. And of course, the next point being the supply side is being controlled. Now, the entire focus of the Consumer Protection Act is the demand side. What is the behavior of the seller vis-a-vis the consumer? Can you control the supply side? From whom are they buying? Whom are this, what are the relationship between the back-to-back suppliers, etc.? Can you really control that? Is that the ambit of the Consumer Protection Act at all? And all these, goes to the three other big issues, is that these rules are contrary to the stated policy level statements such as Digital India, Startup India, ease of doing business, etc., right? So what we are trying to do through these regulations is make a change in the policy in the first place. So I think with that, let me jump to the specific issues under the rules. Now, coming to the e-commerce entity definition, I think the definition in my mind, even the original definition was very wide, because it talks about a platform or an entity owning or operating or managing the platform. Now, there are technology companies that may be actually owning the platform, and they are allowing the multiple, sellers to sort of license that technology and create their own, marketplaces or inventory-based, systems. So in that situation, if you go by the letter of the law, even these tech companies could be viewed as, e-commerce companies. The next issue is that the related parties. Now, there is absolutely related parties which are not even, involved in any of the e-commerce activities. Should they be included in the definition? So there are three issues with the definition. One is it is too wide. The second issue is that because the definition is wide, multiple entities get brushed with the same color of the current marketplaces, and because of that, the obligations are getting imposed on certain companies which are not even warranted by their business models. And I'm going to quickly, give you a couple of examples.
Could you conclude, Gauri, as soon as you can?
Yes, sure. So I think then probably what I'll do is I will send this presentation which you can circulate to the
Please,
group.
please do.
That what will happen is, they will see the points involved.
No,
So I
could
think from a
come to your conclusion.
yes. So I think my conclusion would be, let us go back to the OECD paper, which was published in 2016, which gives all these rights from an e-commerce in the e-commerce space, and revisit the entire set of rules in the context of these recommendations, and not get into at all the supply side, remove the competition law issues, remove the data related issues completely from these regulations, and just focus on the consumer disclosure, transparency, and redressal. All other issues are already being dealt with by other laws. Let us avoid the overlap of the laws.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very sorry to have rushed you, but as I said, I mean, too many speakers. And I think the point which you concluded with, in terms of the OECD recommendations, are very sensible. Incidentally, when you spoke about it, a recent news report says that e-commerce is only 4% of the total retail trade. Now, if you're addressing only 4%, you can well imagine. Secondly, I think the very important point which you made was the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing. The incoherence and the incogency in the approach of the government to these various issues without understanding as to what you're doing, you're only making it more difficult for businesses to prosper. My only, now, when you talk in terms of related parties, one very important aspect of the related parties which has been missed out, and that has been very innovative, are the delivery services, whether it's Swiggy or Zomato or whatever, delivery, etc., etc. And there are a lot of people who are following this particular model. It has created many jobs and it has expanded trade very easily. Again, looking at the pandemic situation, people are relying more and more on outsourcing their needs rather than to do it themselves. With that, let me thank you once again and request Bivan Sharan. Bivan, sorry, George, thought you were Bivan Sharma.
No, it's very common. I'm very used to it. That's no problem. I'm happy to be Sharma, Sharan, whatever.
8 minutes, Bivan.
Yeah, sir. I think I won't exceed my time because Gauri has essentially laid out the legal, regulatory, philosophical landscape here. So I'll just dive directly into an aspect. So we are clear here that, you know, after repeal of MRTP, there was a segregation between Competition Act and Consumer Act, as you also laid out, and different aspects had to be dealt with accordingly. But here we also see, sir, beyond that segregation now being diluted, there is also a sort of a disguised industrial policy that we see coming out through this set of rules, which I'll walk some of the audience through with examples. But before that, I just want to say that every government in history has been tempted and has practiced some form of industrial policy across the world. And industrial policies, from my understanding, are public policies that are aimed at stimulating industrial growth and ultimately transforming an economy from a low productivity regime to a high productivity regime, and in our case from agriculture making the transition to manufacturing and services. Unfortunately, the results have been disappointing, especially in some of the poorest regions of the world. This is where the world is so unfair that even in countries like India, despite overall growth, there's been little employment growth, as we all know, in say, for instance, the formal manufacturing sector, which obviously would be one of the beneficiaries of any sort of an industrial policy approach, which is also visible here. Another characteristic of industrial policy has been that it's always targeted sectors. And therefore, the discussion of picking winners based on some variant of comparative advantage is usually about which sector should receive preferential treatment. But sectors don't trade, sir, as we know. Firms trade. And the reason we have traditionally focused on sectors is that we don't have sufficiently detailed firm level information, data, and particularly in developing countries to know what it will take to pull them up, make them globally or locally competitive. Now the situation is improving, especially in the digital space where we have a lot of granular data. We're finding also a great deal of heterogeneity among firms within a sector. This was, sir, for those of us who are also following the antitrust and competition debates, this week itself, the Federal Trade Commission was told off by a US district court in light of a case on Facebook, that the complaints made out against Facebook weren't sufficiently detailed using evidence. And this is a problem that we're going to see often. And the judge also went on to say that the FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission, had done a very bad job of actually figuring out the relevant market of Facebook. Is it a messaging market? Is it a social media market? Is it a personal communications market? And these are all issues that will complicate, obviously, the industrial policy and competition landscape in the country, which is clearly now interacting with how we are looking at consumer protection as well. So in particular, in sectors without an obvious comparative advantage, there can also be highly successful exporting firms and some unsuccessful ones. For instance, these kinds of observations have led to a lot of research also in comparable jurisdictions like Middle East and North Africa, that the characteristics of successful firms, such as the quality of management and the possibility that industrial policy would be more effective if it is targeted at improving these characteristics rather than a sector, there's enough evidence to now show that looking at these qualities or characteristics that enable firms to perform better within their sectors is a more fruitful approach to industrial policy. Why am I talking about all of this? Because ultimately the government also seems to be in the mood to express its intention in one way or the other to give a fillip to local retailers. Let's be clear, the objective is twofold. One is consumer protection, but the other is also retailer protection. Now, if it is retailer protection, then we have to see which categories of retailers will really benefit from this. And as Gauri said, there is a distinction obviously being made between offline and online. We saw that during COVID as well, sir, where offline retailers were allowed to sell during curfew in many places, whereas online retailers were relegated to non-essential category. People like me who are privileged enough to sit at home like all of us and work sometimes, in absence of some critical electronic equipment or other productivity tools, could not look to online sellers to actually fulfill that need. But be that as it may, I'll just pull up a quick analysis of the kinds of impacts this may have. So I hope everyone can see my screen. These are in the second column. These are the ways in which the rules have dealt with certain issues. So let me go one by one, and very quickly I'll just give 4 or 5 examples of how this is seeming like an industrial policy approach where you're picking what business operation I can do or not do, and whether that is in the interest of the consumer or not is something for the forum to debate. But section 5, which is laid out here, 14 part D, says that no e-commerce entity shall permit usage of the name or brand associated with that of the marketplace e-commerce entity for promotion or offer for sale of goods or services on its platform. Now let's look at a real life example like this campaign that was launched by Redbus. It launched a digital campaign called Journey for Dreams to inspire other users to undertake the journey. Now Redbus today, under these rules, if they were effectuated, will not be able to carry out these campaigns, which actually manage to reach a larger swath of users and consumers. Let's look at section 516. Section 516 says, no e-commerce entity shall organize a flash sale of goods or services on its platform. I think this has been written about quite a lot in the last few days. But here again, we can take the example of a Zomato. Now, Zomato runs an ad campaign associating each day of the week with a particular cuisine. Here it says Monday Mondays, for instance, they target healthy eating. Wednesdays are for Oriental food. Thursdays are for Italian cuisine, and so on and so forth. Now, Zomato does not have the option of advertising in this way to achieve its marketing objectives and also to obviously inform consumers of a particular campaign. Section 6, Part 6A. Now, e-commerce marketplace to ensure that it does not use any information collected through its platform for the unfair advantage of its related parties, which you have discussed in associated enterprises. This is, of course, just a vague and broad clause. We can't even imagine how this will operate in a data-heavy business regime, because online businesses generally rely on data analytics and data insights to offer new products and services. For instance, I don't think, sir, today there is great amount of clarity on the fact that there is a limited amount of shelf space even online. It's not unlimited shelf space that an online entity can show you. I mean, at one time when I'm looking at my screen, I can see 5 or 10 options. Now, would I rather as a consumer that those options are weighted according to consumer preferences as they are? And that was, by the way, the model of eBay originally as a marketplace model. eBay perfected that consumer feedback algorithm, which actually became the greatest part of the value of that platform. So consumers knew who to trust, which brands were quality brands, and so on and so forth. Today, we are being told that that's not an option because you have to provide all options at one go. I think that's just impractical. It's impossible to put into operation. Part 6, bracket 6, Part B, marketplaces must ensure that none of its related parties and associated enterprises are enlisted as sellers for sale to consumers directly. Let's think about now online grocery websites like Grofers, Big Baskets, etc. They will have to revisit their business models entirely due to this restriction of sale of private labels on their platforms. Are we arguing here that that something like a Grofer should not white label its goods and sell it in the consumer interest? I don't know. 6, Part 8, last example, is that no marketplace e-commerce entity shall advertise a body of sellers for the purpose of subsidizing a sale on its platform. Now look at this example of a campaign, Amazon's Back to School Day. It promotes vendors selling school supplies. Tomorrow, if this law is effectuated or rules are put into place, it won't even be able to advertise school supply sales as it is today. So that just, these are a list of illustrations, sir, where I want to get back to the central point that if the government India...
I think you exceeded your time, Vivan.
Right, sir. Just last 2 sentences.
Thank you.
Last 2 sentences is that...
No, I'm so sorry to rush people because it's just that we have too many people.
Sir. So just 2 sentences that if the understanding in India for public policy is that we need to create a little bit of space for traditional retail enterprises to flourish, we need to understand how to leverage large firms for what they have rather than showing them away. Now that strategic perspective is in the consumer interest. It has been over the last 10 years. We have all profited from the sales that some of these large enterprises have put up. This means, going back to Gauri's point, more disclosures, perhaps even targets for the number of MSMEs that each large platform must reach out to. I don't think anyone can quibble with the fact that everyone in India who's doing business here has a larger social responsibility than they would in the West. And if we were to frame laws in that way, whether industrial policy laws or consumer interest laws, I don't think that you will have this level of pushback from entities that are operating in India from outside or within India as local entities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vivan, for an excellent analytical presentation that you made. And in terms of industrial policy, of course, let me also speak to my fellow consumer activists that we require better manufacturing in order to get better quality and lower prices. So there is a very direct link as to how industrial policy is drafted and how it is being implemented. And I think Vivan made the important point is that we do not have firm level data in order to see what you have to achieve to do in terms, and this is something which goes on to another dimension, another area of work that we're doing. So I'll leave it at that here, and then now request Saroja and the
Yes.
Saroj?
Yeah.
Yeah. And as quickly as possible.
Just
Yeah, I would like some, some open discussion. We're already 6 o'clock, going to be 10 to 6.
yeah, I'll be making just a couple of points. I have listened to you and also the previous speakers. So I would like to, from a consumer perspective, I would like to start by saying that there are e-commerce space, online shopping has been an issue for consumers for several years now, and with the increase in trade in that space actually. So there are several complaints. In fact, in the last 1.5 years, my inbox, we have a help desk, and there have been several complaints. Like 90% of the complaints that have come have been related to e-commerce actually. Probably because of the situation, the pandemic, and several people have moved to online shopping, and that could be the reason. But then many complaints, and all of us know the type of complaints that come actually. So I think it was important, and we consumer organizations have been engaging with the ministry for several years, asking to actually regulate this space, which has been which was unregulated for a long period. So I think it was good for the government to have come out with the e-commerce rules within under the Consumer Protection Act. But as you rightly said, I think it should have whatever rules are framed should be within the scope of the law. But if it goes beyond the scope, then that becomes an issue. I think here some certain provisions here seem to be like that they have gone beyond the scope of the act actually. And so the purpose of the act is to protect consumers' interests. And so when it comes to e-commerce also, any act or any provision which has to actually protect the interests of consumers should find a place within the act and within the rules. No second thoughts on that. But trying to curtail competition via consumer protection law is not right. Definitely not right. It has to be done by amending that law and or strengthening the notification or the regulations that allow e-commerce to set up shop in India via the FDI route. So they should be looking at amending those, looking at those laws instead of actually bringing everything within the Consumer Protection Act, which could be confusing and which may not benefit the end consumer. So that is very important. In fact, I would like to, I think I would like to go a step further. There are several provisions in this rules which are very consumer friendly. We need to acknowledge that. In fact, I would like to go a step further because today the whole world is talking about sustainable consumption and production, which is part of the consumer protection framework. So I would say like probably we should be looking at more information like the info on country of origin. You should probably say info like carbon footprint in production and logistics, if any animals were harmed, if there is any GMO component there, and also with regard to the packaging, if the single-use plastics are used, and info like this, which is always important and which is in favor of a consumer, should probably we should be demanding for such kind of information. Which could be brought within the scope of this act because it relates to consumer protection. So yeah, with this I would like to conclude. Thank you, Pradeep. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Saroj. That was excellent. And I think the very important point which you made is something which needs to be broadcast, is that consumer labeling should be all-inclusive. It should tell us as to how it has been made and so on and so forth. We had this Ecomark scheme in India, which has been languishing because there's no political will. At least it addressed some of the issues that you raised. And the other issues we are all getting through imported channels. So the least we can tell the Walmarts and the Amazons of this country is to follow the same practices, follow the same standards in India as well. And this is a general impression that I've seen across the world, that the same manufacturers, the same businesses follow different standards here and there. This is pointed out.
Very unfortunate.
Yeah, the Center for Science and Environment had done this study on various soft drinks, and they found that there are differential standards everywhere at all. So that is another issue that we need to be aware of. And whether we can bring in through the consumer protection rules is something which we need to understand. That we don't end up doing something which is going to be regressive and not progressive. We have to be progressive about these things, and this is by and large as to how consumer incentives that you can design in order for them to be little more responsible consumers, as it were. With that, let me now turn to Anusha Iyer, Advocacy Officer from CERC. Anusha, are you there? Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Anusha?
Am I audible now?
Hi, yeah, please. Go
Hello.
ahead. How are you?
I'm good, sir, and thank you very much for this opportunity to represent CRC at this forum.
5 to 7 minutes.
Yes, I'll not take much time because a lot of the points that we wanted to share have already been discussed. Like how Saroja ma'am just said that e-commerce was a sector where consumer protection was really needed. And we were really rooting for this and were actively participating in the formation of the Consumer Protection Act. And the new rules that have come in, there are some provisions that really are commendable and are for the interests of consumer, like provision for display of the country of origin, and also provisions related to the mis-selling of goods and services, the fallback liability, although there are some vague areas related there. What I would like to focus is that though there are several issues related to overlapping with other laws, the current the provisions in the current draft definitely need a lot of clarifications with respect to the consumer protection, and our comments on these are that especially with related to fallback liability. As of now, the e-commerce entity is liable only when the seller does not deliver the goods or services. But what if they deliver a substandard or a fake counterfeit product? Even then, the e-commerce entity has to be liable in this case. So provision of that clause should also be made in the final draft. Another thing that we would want to add is that, again, liability of the marketplace entity should ensure that they should make the e-commerce entity should impose financial disincentives on the sellers who have been found to supply substandard, counterfeit or fake products. As of now, they are doing it voluntarily, but that doesn't help prevent such cases, and that is why there is a very urgent need to include these provisions in the Act. And like how we've discussed, why flash sales is not necessarily, the government debate is going on that they are not going to be completely banned, but that clarity needs to be there in the draft that has been put out. And it's still very unclear whether it is only the marketplace and e-commerce entity who cannot hold flash sales, or even brand-owned entities can't hold flash sales, and whether flash sales itself, is there a blanket ban on them? So with this, I think these are some of the comments that we would want to make on this draft.
Thank you, Anusha. That was an excellent, short and succinct comments from you. Now, let me tell you, this rules of origin thing is basically a trade protectionist agenda. It is not a consumer protection agenda. What is wrong with, whether you buy the goods from Denmark or you buy it from wherever? Secondly, the same rules of origin issue is something which have to be dealt with under the trade laws and not under the consumer protection regime. This is a typical example of, bringing in things here which are not should not be here. Now, in terms of liability of a platform vis-a-vis the seller is something which is still debatable. Whether the platform is an agent of the seller, I think that is the point which has to be looked at legally, and I'm sure there would be a lot of discussion going on this particular issue. Flash sales, you're right. There's no clear definition, with the result that it can be a slippery slope that somebody wants to pull up some seller like this is a flash sale and you should not be doing it. Then God help. Now, though many of you might remember one of the most horrendous provisions in our legal system was the Section 66 of the Information Technology Act. It was so vaguely defined, with the result that it could even catch hold of two young girls in Thane, one had commented that to have a holiday because of the death of Baba Saheb Thackeray, and the other had liked it, and they were both pulled up under Section 66 of the IT Act. Ultimately, Supreme Court struck it down. What I'm only trying to point out to you that we have to be very careful as to how we define each section in a way that it doesn't become a slippery slope and gives a handle to the authorities to enforce in the manner in which they like. And now you go on proving that this is bad, and you wait for another 10 years for the Supreme Court to decide that the provision was bad in law. Having said that, let me now turn to Suren Kastia, former chairperson of the Consumer Guidance Society of India, Mumbai, the oldest consumer organization in India in a sense. Suren,
yeah.
Over to you. 5 minutes, Suren.
Yeah, sure. I try to share the screen with the PPT if
do we need a PPT? Why don't you go ahead?
Small, just to give a better.
Okay.
Visual.
You can upload.
Okay. Well.
Oh.
Only 3 issues from my side, but all relating to legalities basically, not with consumer protection connection.
Yeah.
But yes, one quick comment. On the whole, it appears to be a document against the philosophy of ease of doing business.
Yes.
It's going to be a long, complex document. Now, the way amendments are proposed, the numbering seems to be totally wrong. Wherever they have included the new definitions, they have been numbered in continuation by deleting the old definitions. Whereas, like, if you have a new definition, it should be read as B small a, B small b, B small c. And the existing definition of grievance should be continued to be read as subsection C. That's one suggestion which, in fact, cuts must inform those people. Second is the definition of e-commerce entity. Now it says it means any person who owns, operates, or manages. But unfortunately, the term person has not been defined in the rules. There is a possibility of litigation at a later stage if this term person is challenged, because like for example, under FEMA or even under competition law, the term person has been defined as to include all possible forms of business organizations like Hindu Undivided Family, a cooperative society, an artificial juridical person. Now, if this term is not defined, there is a possibility of some kind of litigation, and they have added the definition of the related party from the Companies Act 2013. Now, section 2 bracket 76 is to be read with section 2 bracket 77 under the Companies Act, is one of the most complex definition under the Companies Act. Even earlier act also, the 1956 Act, this term was definitely a complicated one. But yes, the inclusion of related party term from the Companies Act would perhaps plug all possible loopholes of people taking advantage through holding companies or subsidiary companies or associate companies, or through directors' personal relatives, or through their managerial persons' personal relatives. So all those possible loopholes perhaps would be plugged through this incorporation of Section 2 bracket 76 of the Companies Act in the definition of a person. Coming to the duties, of course, the number has been changed, which needs to be kept at the old number. They have used the term partnerships incorporated under the Indian Partnership Act 1932. Now, under 1932, there was no provision of a firm being incorporated. What you were allowed to do was only forming a firm which can be an unregistered firm or a registered firm. So this word incorporated should be substituted by the word formation. Yes, now incorporation of a partnership concern is allowed in the LLP Act, which is covered in the subsequent part of the proposed amendment. And again, one term OR is missing, which may again leads to vague interpretations, and therefore it's better that this term OR is added at this place. Again, if we go through the original rule 4 bracket 1 bracket A, there was a mention of subclause 3 of clause 5. This clause, for the other reason, the fact that an e-commerce entity shall be a company, was questioned before Delhi High Court. By the time Delhi High Court could come out with a judgment, this particular clause has been substituted in May 2021, saying that it's not mandatory that e-commerce entity needs to be a company. An e-commerce entity can be any form of business organization. But then again, the reference here to FEMA is connected to clause 4 of clause 5 of section 2. Now, if we see the old provision, it was subclause 3 of clause 5. The way rules were amended in May 2021, it said subclause 4 of clause 5. And again, the proposed amendment, which is now given in the proposed set, it talks of, again, subclause 3 of clause 5. So let there be a clarity from the lawmakers as to what they are talking about. Should it be subclause 3 of clause 5 of FEMA, or should it be subclause 4 of clause 5? By the way, I just picked up these clauses from FEMA. It talks about an office, branch or agency in India, and the other one talks about agency outside India. Probably what they want is to cover both these kind of entities so as to again plug all possible loopholes or people taking advantages. There is, I think, equally essential need for CUTS team to go through this small guidance note on accounting by e-commerce entity. It's released by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India in the month of January 2021, and it may give various views from accounting perspective relating to consumer protection as to how these rules are drafted by the institute and how they are to be viewed by the consumer entities. Of course, I got hold of this document day before only, so I will also try to do it. But CUTS team would be more equipped to analyze these drafting norms, because ultimately these e-commerce entities are going to follow these guidance notes. That's all as far as my comments are concerned.
Thank you, Suren.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know whether we had you're welcome to. I request the audience to raise their hand if they wish to speak, or to use the chat box to ask any question to any of the speakers. Ujjwal?
Yes, I want to make a small intervention. And also
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. You're the next speaker. I beg your pardon.
So that's okay. That's okay.
I beg your pardon. Please go ahead.
Just and then also
No, go ahead with your 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay. My looking at this rules and amendment is from the optimal regulation again. That we understand that the digital economy is like a two-way sword, दो धारी तलवार है. It can end up in a very concentrated and market-powered economy, and if managed well, it can also be used as a very inclusive economy, which is the need of the hour. The digital economy, the characteristics has its characteristics like winner takes all, or using the consumer data or network effect. Because of this category, it has accelerated, kind of the already growing concentration in the market, and hence more nuanced approach is required to trace that. But how to intervene is the challenge. Since we understand that this digital disruption or the e-commerce or the economy is beneficial to a consumer, including me. I mean, I can say it by experience, not looking at the evidence or so. So any intervention has to be very optimal and very careful in that sense that it does not disturb the emerging ecosystem. It's still in nascent state, while able to mitigate the concerns. In this regard, it is also important to choose or how to choreograph between the various regulations that are available or various tools that are available, and not creating certain things that goes against the emerging ecosystem, like over-regulation. And this very proposed amendment is basically to kind of over-regulate and micromanage. And we understand that this will damage the emerging ecosystem. I first look at what was the rationale for the government to come out with this. Since we had a new Consumer Protection Act of 2019, we already have consumer protection rules of e-commerce of 2020. And what prompted government to amend this? Was it that what Saroja was saying, that 90% of complaint has come for e-commerce? What then? Whether the new act and the new rules that is already under force, whether that was not sufficient, क्या वो काफी नहीं थी, इसीलिए ये आपको लाया गया? Was there any study on that? I got some answer from the press release of the PIB press release of the government of the 21st June, and it seems that the government jumped to the conclusion. In fact, it points out that received several representations from aggrieved consumers, traders, and associations against widespread cheating and unfair trade practices being observed in ecosystem. Now, cheating is a concern, but there is a law. I mean, 420 सब लोग जानता है. Was that a failure? That what we want to inform the policymakers? Was that the failure? Where is the evidence that this was the failure? Similarly, unfair trade practices. The new act, the Consumer Protection Act of 2019, has a very comprehensive definition of unfair trade practices under, I think, section 247 also. It's a 2-page definition, well illustrated. And was that a failure to them, the unfair trade practices that e-commerce ecosystem has engendered, the complaint? It is not the rise of the disputes under e-commerce ecosystem. I think it is whether the existing rules or the regime has failed to do that, so that there is a reason to amend. I think government or any other entity has failed to. There is a gap in kind of satisfying the audience that yes, there was a necessity. I don't think that was a necessity, because in the next para of the press release, government jumps to the conclusion. The conclusion is that these unfortunate incidents has negatively impacted the consumers and business sentiments in market and causing immense distress and anguish to many. On the contrary, in the pandemic, I saw this ecosystem as a boon to us. In fact, it helped us. I mean, I was a big beneficiary, being a only male member in my family, and only person who can go out and shop in this. So I think, and this, if this is the official reason for coming out with the proposed amendment, I think it is not satisfactory. We should revisit the reason why. Was there a failure of consumer protection 2019 and the rules of 2020? Was that inadequate to address the concerns that was raised, that the representatives of aggrieved consumers and the traders associations? And for the traders and associations, I don't think this is a forum anyway. But for the consumers, if Saroja can enlighten us later on, was that a study was done that the rules were insufficient, and that's why we needed an amendment. I would like to know. Coming to the over-regulation and the kind of, as Gauri said, that these are the rules for the future and how we imagine future. Recently, we had that Farm Reform Act, three Farm Acts, and I recall one of the acts gave a very easy way of establishing an e-commerce entity by a farmers producer organization, or any person just having a PAN card can establish an e-commerce platform for the farmers on the one end, selling and connecting the buyers. It looked very easy. I was incredible. Government wants it easy. But after looking at this, I think that vision will certainly be harmed because that new coming FPOs entity, e-commerce entity, will have to have compliance officer, will have to many of the grievances officers and many of the other nitty-gritties have to follow. They are just that it is still not germinated. And after germination, we have to kind of guard, like a tree guard, that let's grow for at least 3 to 4 years. And after that, when fruit comes, then okay, then all the rules would apply. There is no safeguards for such kind of, and these are the tools to make digital economy inclusive, or any economy inclusive. To kind of onboard the rural side or farmer side or the trader side on board on the e-commerce. We can also imagine an entrepreneur in a city, kind of connecting consumers on one side through, say, kind of investing in creating a consumer association or RWAs as a buyers and connecting FPOs and nearby farmers as sellers, daily sellers like sabji, bhaji, jo bhi. उस ड्रीम को, उस एंटरप्रेन्योर्स को बहुत ज़्यादा धक्का लगने वाला है इस तरह के रेगुलेशन से। एक और डाइकोटोमी हम गैदर करते हैं जो कि फार्म एक्ट रिफॉर्म्स के समय बोला गया सरकार के द्वारा, और जो अभी बोला जा रहा है, उस समय बोला गया कि there are too many intermediaries, sort करने से दोनों को फायदा होगा, farmers will also benefit, but consumers will also benefit. It's the merit in that. But here it is doing the opposite. It is, I think, promoting the long intermediaries just because they need jobs or things like that. The narrative has changed. So the necessity that the press release is trying to establish for this proposed amendment, I think that is farce because of the changing narratives of the government. What I understand is that government is doing for vote bank, I mean pleasing certain trader groups, or the note bank. भाई मैं सबको कंट्रोल करके रखा हूँ, तुम नेशनल चैंपियन बन, and there is an electoral bond that will go into and have a good election and win. So we should understand it very clear, and the connecting to the recent philosophy of the Bajar, Samaj, and सरकार बाजार का ड्यूटी होना चाहिए कि हाँ, we should come out with a white paper of how, I mean, like Pradeep has said about consumer charters, come out with that. Platforms, e-commerce platforms should come out with the suggestion by the recommendation by the Competition Commission of India that what you have done for self-regulation in terms of platform neutrality. Platform neutrality is a very, very important matter to be pursued, but certainly not under these consumer protection rules. And they have tried to address that in here. CCI has kind of said that these are the things that should be self-regulation, and the bazaar should come out with the white paper and what are they doing on this self-regulation. That should come out to inform the polity and inform the consumers. We need that. Secondly, bazaar should also invest in consumer education on these issues. You can see that there are lots of consumer organizations, or we generally have that myopic view, and we will try to do everything under a consumer protection regime without understanding the repercussion of that. So the education of consumer organizations is necessary, and bazaar should invest in that, perhaps create a consumer fund or the e-commerce to educate online consumers on many aspects. One of them is this. Sarkar, I have already told that it should kind of be very serious about what they are doing. That's poorly draft and amendment, and it's global audience that they are also are accessing this and they are studying this, and this gives us a very bad name to as Indians everywhere. So it should not be a very casual affair to kind of we are doing this for public comments and we'll see later. It's not just a checking of box that okay, comments are invited. So our suggestion or my suggestion would be to hold it for some time. If you are doing it for the consumer welfare, let discuss and debate with the consumer organizations of India. Let CCC, the Consumer Coordination Committee, handle, and you government should fund those debates. And because we need to understand many things, and before kind of intervene in a very myopic way, we need to understand if we have a whole of a bazaar, sarkar, and samaj, we are a samaj here, and for us, so we have to as a samaj, we have to if it comes to policy making or suggestion or giving, we have to be careful about this. Because we should not be responsible for any new e-commerce entity that can connect farmers to the consumers, which will benefit rural economy, which will be inclusive in true sense. So that is my suggestion, and if possible, consumer organizations should kind of come out with a memorandum. I mean, maybe on various provisions, it will not be easy, but at least give some principle kind of memo to the government that this e-commerce is beneficial to us in general. There are certain concerns which need to be addressed, but we should be careful about this. And let's wait before you implement these rules in a hurry. Let's wait and let's educate and give us a platform for such debate. We will debate and discuss, and let's give a 3-4 months or 6 months to debate, and not fund that also, so that it's a publicly funded debate of the consumer organizations, and then we will manage that thing. That's
Thank you, Ujjwal. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I just have, I think the point which you made about farmers being allowed, FPOs being allowed to set up e-commerce platforms, and for them to be able to comply with this kind of regulations would be impossible. Now, there's a general observation which I would like to make, and this is my concern in our legislative processes in India, I studied law in the 1960s. And one of my teachers was an excellent barrister in Calcutta, who said there is a golden principle of legal drafting. The golden principle is what? That the more you define, the more limitations you create. And that is a principle our draftsmen in Ministry of Law, or whichever ministry you're talking about, have forgotten. Now, if you go back to the Consumer Protection Act 1986, who says it doesn't cover e-commerce? If you look at the definition of services, it is an all-inclusive definition. Any case, so there was a much of halla gulla, and a lot of consumer organizations also sang and danced, and that we have a new law, and so on and so forth. And we opened up a beehive. And bureaucrats love to, love beehives, so that they can continuously sort of gain honey from wherever they can. And that is why you find these rules are coming, which are so illogical. They don't even address, some issues do address consumer protection, but that has to be done as a lip service or as a smart armor, smart cover, in order to get in these kind of institutional issues which are not related to consumer protection at all. Rules of origin, as I said, we have trade laws in India which govern rules of origin. We have trade agreements on the basis of which we allow the imported goods. If you go back to 1995, before the World Trade Organization came into being, we had restrictions on import of consumer goods. We were only 1 out of 7 countries which had this restriction. A dispute was raised against us, we lost the dispute, and we had to open the market for import of consumer goods. I still remember, and those of you who are probably not even born by at that time, was using ballpoint pens made in India which used to leak or not write or and so on. And we could then now get good ballpoint pens and so on. That led to de-reservation of small-scale industries in many of these areas. Did the Indian consumer lose or did he gain? He gained. And there was a fallacy which was being promoted at that point of time that jobs are going down. On the contrary, small-scale industries continuously started rising. There were more and more new industries which are coming up because the economy opened up. The overall economic transactions which take place, and that is what I said. You must understand the important point made by Vivan Sharan in terms of industrial policy and the important points which have been made even otherwise. That I have a request from Rama Venugopal to raise a question. Rama, over to you. Please make it.
Yeah, I guess.
Please make it short and sharp.
No, just a simple question. Thanks for the opportunity. I am from Chennai. I am from a Management System Consultants Association. I just would like to only touch upon one thing. All these forums discussions are happening last 2-3 days. The focus is actually on products. On services, I would like to raise, with this, especially with specific reference to healthcare sector.
Right.
Being a consultant working with that, the kind of scams or scandals, whatever you call it as, that has taken place in the COVID testing. A scenario by these online aggregators, online portals needs actually dedicated discussion by itself. If the protection is actually for consumers, then consumer protection is the intent and the focus. Health is something, which is kind of taken for granted, and all the testing because of the COVID, the community's basic need was testing, and the testing was not done by the pathologists or the laboratories.
Very good point. Very good point.
It is all done by the
Sure.
aggregators who did not have any
No,
connection with industry.
Yeah, I can name other services also.
Absolutely. So that
They're
is what
working
actually,
online, and I agree with you that we are focusing on products without looking at
it
services.
is what that is what it is, and it has come to a scenario. Yesterday, laboratory head was telling me that they were even collecting the urine samples through Dunzo. So which is very dangerous.
Right.
The biomedical samples, the health hazards, and the last mile connectivity is very important when it comes to healthcare, like any other service for that matter or a product. And the people who are actually involved as part of the supply chain in the last mile connectivity do not have simple thing like a sample collection,
Correct.
which is
Thank you
so
very-
critical. Which is so
Thank you, thank you,
critical.
thank you very much. We are just 5 minutes away from closing.
That's all it is. I just
Yeah, no,
wanted to
thank you.
raise this. One-
Excellent, excellent. May I request Saroja? Saroja, would you like to react to what Ramaji just said, including whatever else you may like to speak about in terms of the conversations which have happened?
I completely agree with Ms. Rama, whatever she has raised. I think healthcare,
Rama Venugopal.
it's a Ms. Rama Venugopal.
She's
So
from
I know. Yeah. So I think it has to be, we have to set aside time to actually speak about the flaws in the healthcare system. Actually, several issues there actually which need to be addressed. Yeah, I think that is something that we need to. In fact, this morning we were talking about the costs of the oximeters and the costs of the glucometers and the BP apparatus, everything. Like there are several issues there which need to be actually discussed, and I don't think we have the time, or maybe this is not the forum where we will be able to discuss in detail.
No, Saroja, you could take up this as an invitation and to organize something on healthcare.
Sure, definitely.
In any case, I wanted your reaction to the discussion that we've had so far on this, because you had certain views.
Yes. So I think that we need to focus on consumer protection entirely. There are several issues that consumers face, be it the online or the offline space, and I think it would be good to actually focus only on that and see if we are able to address the woes of consumers. And consumer awareness also needs to be continuously increased. Like people are also not aware. People just go and place order for he or she, it will be a fly-by-night operator, like who would have actually advertised something on Facebook. People go and place order there, and the next day they make the payment also. They don't get the product, and that there is an issue there. Where will you go and complain? Whom will you talk to? Like there is no person there to whom will you write? So these are all issues like where consumers also need to understand whom to trust and how to actually buy products when they buy online. That is also important. And at the same time, talking about this particular topic that we are discussing today, I think it is very important that the government revisits the rules and make sure that all aspects related to consumer protection are brought into this. But then,
Saroja, can I interrupt you?
Yes, please.
I will ask you to take a pause. But I just discovered a very good question by Amrit Lal Saha, our fellow activist from Agartala.
Yes.
Can anyone please highlight who has first suggested the amendments of these e-commerce rules before the same has been tested, and what are the views of the concerned ministries in the matter of amendment? Would you like to answer that? Can anyone please highlight who has first suggested the amendment of the e-commerce rules before the same has been tested, and views of the concerned ministries in the matter of amendment?
It's a good question, because in fact I was actually waiting to see the earlier rules to be actually effectively implemented, because I didn't see implementation on the ground. There were several issues, and seriously I don't know who proposed, probably because of the number of complaints, because NCH had put out that like out of the number of complaints received by them, a large percentage of complaints were on online shopping and e-commerce. Probably that was one of the reasons, and maybe many complaints had gone to the ministry directly.
Okay.
which could be the reason for them to have come out with further
Thank you.
amendments to the rules.
Thank you. Can I ask Gauri? Gauri, would you like to react to this? Gauri, are you
Honestly,
there?
no, that's a question I have been debating with myself. What I have been told that there is not been much consultation around this, even interministerial is what I'm hearing. I could be completely wrong, but that is the feedback I have.
No, you are right.
Yeah.
You are right.
It is only within a smaller circuit within the ministry only that it has been discussed. So
Okay, now, Gauri, while you are still there in Saroja, a very dear friend Anil Johri, who used to be with the Quality Control Council of India, has raised a very important question on healthcare services. These are largely unregulated, and so are medical devices, which are in news in this COVID era. We need regulations in place where health and safety is involved. Now, health and safety are both rights under the Consumer Protection Act, and there are provisions, existing provisions, even in the 1986 Act. Gauri, what would you like to say to that?
sure. So, as you may be aware, under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, new medical devices rules were issued effective Jan 2018. They were initially controlling only limited medical devices, but from last February, now it has expanded to all the medical devices across the board. And the government, the Department of Pharmaceuticals and the CDSCO, they are actually working on regulating the sale of medical devices. It is still in the works insofar as categorization, registration, etc. But the ministry is already cognizant of this issue, and they are looking into this already.
Thank you. Can I ask, the last question is to Anusha. Anusha, what is your response to this last minute's discussion on healthcare services or healthcare products? CRC has been doing a lot of testing and so on, which is what I know. Anusha, are you there?
Yes, I'm there, and
Yeah.
I completely agree to the lot discussion that healthcare services are something, especially in the pandemic, that consumers have faced lot of issues, and that is something that consumer protection is really required, and not even the existing laws that are there. A lot of awareness is required among consumers on how they can use these existing laws to not just what are their rights, and also what redressal mechanisms they have, and how they can get their redressals.
Thank you. Can I invite Anil Johri for the last word? Anil, over to you. Anil.
Yeah.
Anil, please go ahead.
Good evening.
Can
Yes,
you put on your video?
Yeah, good
So that
evening.
people can see you, your face, your lovely
okay.
face. Good. At least I'm not the oldie.
Can you see me now?
Yeah.
Okay, good evening. Thank you very much. No, the only point I was making was that health and safety are issues for regulation, whether be it products, be it services. And I don't think we have even done an analysis of what services should be regulated based on health and safety, as also deceptive trade practices. There is nobody has done this analysis as a consolidated one that cross so many services, whether we need to regulate education, healthcare, what are the other services we need to regulate. So my view is that Consumer Affairs Department should be doing it, because that's the department which is for protection of consumers. So healthcare has that problem because we have this Clinical Establishment Act since 2010, hardly implemented, standards not enforced yet. So we have a huge problem there. States have to adopt. And medical devices, I'm aware that there are medical devices used, but the today's problem is that complete regulation is kicking in by August 2023. We are in transition. And today, whatever products we are talking about, the names which were taken, pulse oximeters, oxygen concentrators, ventilators, masks, all are unregulated, unfortunately. All of them today are unregulated and will remain so for next at least 1 year, if not more. So that's a problem which is immediate problems needs to be handled as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Saroja. We've given you a good critical mass to organize something on healthcare, which CAG should do. And
Sure.
let me now, this excellent resource person is here who can raise a very good debate, get hold of somebody from the health ministry or even a person like Keshav Deshiraju. Do you know him?
Yeah, he is on our board.
There you are. So get Keshav to, help you do this.
Yeah, sure.
And with that, we are now request if Vivan or Suren have any last words to say, and then we close. Vivan? Vivan, are you there? Vivan,
Yes, sir, I'm here. Very
any
much
last
here.
words?
Sir, I think the points raised on health and safety are extremely important, and that is precisely the direction in which we can start to apply some of our strategic considerations when we're looking at regulating new economy industries. We should also perhaps look at some targeted interventions like export promotion programs that can impact small exporters. Because while these firms are marginal in trade, such programs, cannot be game changers without the participation of some of the larger firms that such rules seek to regulate. Therefore, even I had mentioned earlier that there could be targets set for outreach to MSME sellers, with many of the larger firms are already doing a good job of it. But similarly, there could be targets on export and other areas. So what I'm trying to suggest is that if we have to take an industrial policy approach, then certainly some of the points raised earlier also on the sustainability front, to look at environment, labor, and other metrics which the European Union and others have been looking at for a long time as standards that this industry has to adopt and push further. Whatever happened to some of those conversations around packaging material? As a consumer, I feel, sir, almost embarrassed ordering from some of the food delivery and e-commerce companies where I get small amounts of food in large packaging. Those are precisely the issues that I think really the government of India needs to be aggressive about and set environmental, labor, trade standards that are at a high threshold, because obviously the transatlantic countries, there's a breakdown in consensus on how they want to regulate big tech. But if we want to regulate big tech, then I think we can take a leaf out of the book of the previous, non-tariff barrier discussions that were had before the Trump and Chinese imbroglios, which have derailed some of those issues, and actually push further, and test the commitment of these firms to such issues. And those can include health and safety and other considerations. So I'll just say, sir, targeted, measurable efforts that are actually interest of consumers as far as consumer protection is concerned, and equally for industrial policy. Let's do stuff that actually matters. Let's help firms export. Let's help firms onboard. Let's help firms integrate with large marketplaces, and so on and so forth. I'll leave it there, sir.
Thank you very much. Everyone, just to remind you, Saroja had raised this particular issue in terms of sustainable consumption. And I think you raised a very important issue in terms of e-commerce deliveries. I know we keep on getting these big packets unnecessarily and waste a lot of corrugated material. I'm sure the corrugated box industry is doing very well. But at what cost? With that, let me now turn to Suren. Suren, are you there?
Yes.
Any last words?
Well, taking clues from Ujjwal and Saroja, my suggestion would be that, hello? Hello?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Yes, go ahead.
No, as, submitted that they have been receiving a large number of complaints from e-commerce sector, and Ujjwal has suggested that we need intense debate on the proposed amendments. What needs to be done by CUTS or CAG is that if these complaints which have been received can be analyzed on the touchstone of the proposed amendments, and then one can conclude whether the proposed amendments would be fulfilling the needs of the consumer protection or no? Because we don't have much experience of witnessing the execution of the old rules. They are just a year old. And therefore, if the complaints which have been received can be tested on the proposed amendments, there can be a proper document which can come out in the form of amendments. And therefore, we need more time and intensive debate on these proposed amendments.
Thank you, Suren. Thank you very much. And with that, we now come to a conclusion of this particular event. And on my behalf, let me thank all of you once again and hand over the proceedings to George, my distinguished colleague, to propose a vote of thanks, including to summarize what are the key takeaways that he could see in this particular event, because he has to take forward our agenda. Over to you, George.
Thanks. I think you were beautifully summarizing the speeches of each of the speakers, so I don't have much to summarize. But before getting into that, I would like to make a brief response in response to the question raised by Mr.
George, I asked you for key takeaways, not summarizing.
No, I'm not summarizing. Yeah. Mr. Saha was asking from where this amendments came. So I would like to mention that please look at the panel headed by Pratap Singh Bajwa, which is the panel on subordinate legislation. There's a huge report on each of these proposals. So it will be better to look at their 245th report. And as recommended by this panel on subordinate legislation, the Department of Consumer Affairs had gone ahead with the proposed amendments to the consumer protection legislation. The key takeaways, I will say, the main concern raised was the regulatory overlap. I will summarize everything in that. And the main suggestion was just to focus on the consumer and look at from the consumer angle. Of course, you also had mentioned, which was a very simple, and for the common consumers, it will be very difficult to understand the issues like abuse of dominance, data protection, and things like that, including into the Consumer Protection Act. So this will be the two things. The main concern is the regulatory overlap in this proposed amendments. And the main suggestion will be to focus on the consumer issue. That's all I want to say as the key takeaways. I would like to thank all the speakers, mainly the Gauri Gokhale and Vivan Sharan, regret the earlier mistake, who made the presentations on the possible issues with the proposed amendments, and also the 4 representatives from each of the consumer organizations, Saroja, Anusha, Surendra and Ujjwal, who made excellent points on different aspects. Even Ujjwal was questioning even the need for these amendments. And finally, I will thank Mr. Mehta for the opening remarks, starting with the touching upon the political economy and concluding with the need for the regulatory impact assessment, and beautifully moderating this whole roundtable. Only one request I have, this was a good learning for us also. We have heard different viewpoints. Incorporating that, CUTS will be submitting our comments to this proposed amendments before 6th of July, which is the deadline. We request other consumer organizations also to submit the responses, views, suggestions before the deadline. I hope that will help the Department of Consumer Affairs in rethinking on some of these proposed amendments. With that, I conclude. Once again, thanks to all the speakers and all the participants for attending this round table. Thank you.